Hi, and welcome to Care for Creative's Community Conversations. I'm Dr. Mary DeRate. I'm the co-creator of the Care for Creatives program and a professor of counseling at the George Washington University. Care for Creatives is a partnership between George Washington University and the DC Creative Affairs Office. This program is focused on two things: providing the community with conversations and information about mental health and creatives, and offering pay-what-you-can therapy and mental health support services through the Community Counseling Services Center at George Washington University on our Foggy Bottom campus. Today's guest, who I'm very excited to talk to, is Rola Z, creator of Funny Arabs. Thank you so much, Rola, for joining us.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really happy to be talking to you. I think the work that you've been doing and the comedy that you're doing is so amazing. And I think I would love to just start by asking you, how did you kind of make this transition into comedy? And then how did you tie it together with like coping with trauma and understanding your experience in a funny way?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. I mean, nobody goes into comedy because they're happy. So
Right.
basically my life fell apart. I got laid off, my marriage ended, there was financial crisis, my own personal financial crisis.
Right.
There was an explosion in Beirut, my home country, and COVID, you know, which at the time we called the least of our problems. So all of these things happened. So I found that the only way to cope was comedy, and that's how I started my journey.
That's really interesting. There have been so many things that have hit, right? And both internationally and personally in the last few years. And it sounds like a lot was going on for you. Was it hard to transition away from whatever you were doing before, the work, into comedy, or?
So I'm actually a corporate woman. So I used to work at Fortune 500 companies. So like producing a show, producing the event, all of that stuff comes naturally to me. And then, you know, being on stage and, you know, public speaking, communications, all of that, you know, I had that, you know, down packed, and now all I need to do is be funny. So that's the part that I needed to work on, sort of, you know, work on my craft. I guess your question is more sort of like, how did I transition into it?
Yeah.
I've always gone to humor, gone to comedy to sort of like just feel better about something. I think sometimes life is a dark comedy, and you know, and unless you can find like laughter in these hidden places, like how are you going to deal with it?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I like the phrase you just used, the dark comedy. You have a special, right, or around dark comedy?
Yeah, well, it's actually like I produced DC's only dark comedy show. I grew up watching British comedy, you know, Monty Python, this kind of thing. These are my influences. And as I got older, I found like, you know, comedy is so diverse, right? It's so like, you know, what makes us laugh is just like, you know, that's the you know, the $1 million question, right? We don't know ourselves what makes us laugh, you know, because we all laugh at completely different things. I laugh at very dark, very edgy, sort of gallows humor. And when I say dark, I don't mean like graphic sexual content. When I say dark comedy, I mean sort of gallows, British humor, that sort of stuff. So I found that kind of humor, because it's so real and it's so honest, and it comes from pain, and that's what excites me about dark comedy. So I found that in the city there was no space where, you know, we had a show that's purely for dark comedy, purely for people who wanted to hear that. So I thought, if I want it, I might as well build it for everybody.
Yeah, there's a distinction, right, between someone who's like a raunchy comedian versus this idea of dark comedy, which really fascinates me from a psychological perspective in terms of, as human beings, right, we laugh at really horrible things. There's a drive in us, there's something in us to say, I need to laugh at this somehow to cope with it. And, you know, one of the concepts about like recovering from trauma is making meaning. And it seems like that's kind of what Traumedy is. It's making a humorous kind of more positive in some ways meaning of really horrible things that have happened to you. Does that fit? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for putting that way, Doctor. Yeah. It's actually like, you know, I really feel like comedy is resilience. You know, when you come from a war-torn country, you know, I'm not, first of all, I'm not a victim, right? I'm a thriver. I'm here, all is well. So I do not have a victim mentality whatsoever. And I realize how blessed I am compared to a lot of people everywhere. So I just want to, make that very clear. So just regarding comedy as resilience, I think that one of the reasons I'm drawn to comedy as resilience, because I come from a war-torn country. I'm originally Lebanese, and I fled the war in Lebanon over 40 years ago. By boat. I'll say, like, I'm boat people, hashtag Mediterranean Sea Challenge. So for me, and Lebanon has been at some sort of war, like, forever. Even now, there's some, issues happening in Lebanon right now. So that's what we come from, So when you come from hardship, you immediately turn to comedy. It's to me, it's just not a choice. This sort of dark comedy kind of finds you, and there's sort of collective healing in that sort of dark comedy. It's very cultural, and it just makes you feel better as a community. Yeah,
I have some experience in Lebanon and friends there, and I think what you're talking about, the experiences, you can't, it either breaks you or you find a way to be resilient through it, and that comedic response is such a wonderful way of being resilient through it. That it's just a powerful mover. I often tell my students when I'm teaching that crying and laughing are the same process in the body. It's a release of stress. It's a relaxation of energy. It's releasing it, and yet we don't associate that with healing. We associate crying with it, but not the laughing part. So I think it's really powerful. So you've also taken this approach and turned it into a lot of really amazing things. Can you tell me more about some of the things you've accomplished over the last few years as a comedian?
Thank you. I like to think of myself as a community builder and a comedy show producer in addition to being a comedian, because I always say that, it's not about me. I'm just the enabler. But it's true, I love to do is to showcase diverse talent. One of my flagship shows is Funny Arabs Show. I performed at the New York Arab American Comedy Festival at the Gotham Comedy Club a few years ago. And I thought, we don't have anything for Arab American comedians here in DC, so why don't I create it? If you want something, you can build it for everybody. So it's such a wonderful opportunity to showcase, different kinds of, Arab comedians. Whether, guess what? We're not all Muslim, So it was really interesting to showcase different kinds of Arab American comedians. And the other flagship show that I'm very proud of is my Traumedy show, which actually ended up turning into a festival with Middle East Institute, and we also got a grant from the DC Arts and DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, and we ended up turning into a DC Traumedy Festival. Now, Traumedy is, as you may have guessed, everybody may have guessed, is trauma comedy. And what we do is we have different comedians who have been through hardships themselves. So there's no punching down, there's no ableism, nothing like that. You basically talk about your own trauma and you make it funny. And what was really wonderful is not only is it healing for the audience, it's healing for the comedians. So in the end, you are paying for our therapy if you're coming to watch our shows.
I love that. I think, one of the questions that I have about the concept of traumedy is that there is I don't know if it's a stereotype or there's a belief sometimes that comedians tend to have big challenges and maybe avoid their personal struggles through comedy. Do you think that there is a difference in approach between someone who maybe is avoiding their stuff and someone who's actually working through it and making new meaning of it?
Thank you for that question, Doctor. For me, this is why I create my own shows, because I really want the comedians sort of get out of their comfort zones and sort of dig deep and let it all out, because it's kind of catharsis for everybody. There are comedians who use that as healing and use it, and sometimes you get a revelation on stage. Like a friend of mine passed away a couple of years ago, and I was very upset about it, but I didn't know exactly how I felt, and still I started writing the set and performing it. And then through that, I had a breakthrough moment. I was like, okay, this is really helping me heal. And then, the kind of feedback that we get after the Traumedy festivals, it's amazing. We have a cancer survivor, we have someone who attempted suicide, and someone who survived a horrible divorce, and so on. And after that, the reaction from the audience is really what just captivates me, because we get really intense reactions, oh, my husband has cancer and he hasn't cried and he hasn't laughed in 2 years, and they come to our shows and it's a real healing and catharsis for them as well.
that you already answered another question that I had, which was I was very curious about kind of the feedback that you've gotten and the impact that you feel like you've been having on the community and on the people around you who attend and are other comedians coming in. And
I'm changing the world. I'm changing the world, Dr. Mary.
You're being funny, but I think you're right. I think it's actually true because it is making a shift. I think my experience, I love stand-up comedy. It is one of my favorite things. And I think as a therapist, I spend a lot of time hearing people's really horrible, horrible stories. And so I find comedy to be a way of, releasing stress and engaging in all of that too. So I do think that you are offering that to the community. And I know you are also doing work now with schools.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm very curious how that came to be and how it's playing out at this point.
Oh, I'm so excited. So I don't want to mention the particular schools that I've started working with, but I've already done a couple of shows for one school in DC and working on a lot more. And there was an incident at that school whereby the community was a little bit divided, and we had to sort of come together and heal. So they commissioned me to do a comedy show, and it was really wonderful because I showcased like completely different kinds of comedians and different experiences, and we all sort of healed together. And I always feel that humor is the shortest distance between two people.
Oh, I like that. That's really cool. I'm gonna have to write that down somewhere because it is right. That I'm sorry, when you said it, it just really resonated with me because when you laugh with somebody, you feel a connection so much faster. Right? If there's this like disconnect and maybe a discomfort, and then you both laugh at the same thing, and you feel like, oh, this person gets me.
Yeah. And it's really interesting when you travel and you don't go to different countries. As you know, you very well travel. When you go to different countries, you don't understand exactly what people are saying. But even sort of like this sort of non-verbal communication that ends in laughter is also a way to bond. So it can be really powerful.
Absolutely. I have been to many different countries where I've done an activity where I have people as a self-care activity. I have them tell each other funny stories about their life and like try to make it funny. And quite often, like if other people were there hearing it, they would think, wow, these are horrible stories. But they're all told with this humor and this engagement and laughter and that moment of recognition between two people where, oh, I had a similar horrible experience when I was a child, and this really, now I can laugh about it with you.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just this like release that they feel, which is so powerful.
Absolutely. I want to add, it's very much catharsis. And whenever I do my dark comedy shows, there's like this long disclaimer. Like, I realize it's not for everybody, right? Because some stuff is really too dark. And so, but the kind of people who are there, like, they want to be there. It's not because they had nothing better to do. So at the end of the shows, like, I also ask people to share their traumas. Like, does anyone want to share their trauma, And then and we're like, and they're like, oh, it's not funny. We're like, don't worry, we'll make it funny. We're the comedians. That's our job. And one guy, because we'd all been through this sort of transformative, Traumedy show experience. One guy said, my wife cheated on me, and then I got mono, then I got cancer, and it was like so awful. But because of the state we were at, like so many people were laughing. But the fact is that he had recovered, and he was actually on a date at my show. He's like, but it's okay because I recovered and I met this wonderful woman, and now I'm feeling better and I'm thriving. And something just about the way he shared it. Another woman said that her father who had dementia walked in on her with her boyfriend, and and the next day he completely forgot about it. She's like, yeah, thank God I can do anything I want around my father who has dementia, which is obviously she's struggling with this. It's very sad for her that her dad has dementia, but it was sort of a way for her to heal and find humor in it. So all those kind of little anecdotes, you'd be surprised how personal people get at the end of our shows.
But I love it because I think it's such a I was saying to you earlier that like I feel like my field sometimes, while the stuff that we work with in mental health is very serious and very important and very, painful for the people that we're working with, there's also needs to be humor, right? We need to come to a place of, I loved how you started this conversation with, I'm going to tell you some stuff, but I'm not a victim here. I have made something of this and, been resilient through it. And that is the healing mindset that people are looking for. And sometimes accessing the comedy piece can feel too much or feel painful, or if your therapist maybe never is willing to bring it up and help you find some of the humor in it, I think we're doing people a disservice.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to say it's like this. It's like this emotional climax when you laugh at something that's been paining you for so many years. Like, oh my God, it's a transformative experience. And I want to practice what I preach. There's a lot of stuff that I still struggle with, personally, that I haven't dealt with yet because I'm not able to find the humor yet. But once I have found that humor, hopefully I can also, overcome that challenge and just, move on.
Yeah, it just really struck me, that idea of finding the humor. Right, you haven't found the humor in that. I think that maybe is the dividing line for people between, they're working through something, they've experienced something painful, and then they finally find the humor. You have to seek it out. Maybe.
Absolutely, doctor. I feel like I'm getting a free therapy session here today. Oh, thank you so much. But I find, I as I'm saying this now, and just had a revelation also, that it's not just like I find it funny, but I'm unable to remove myself from it. So if I can look at myself objectively, like, oh, this thing happened to this woman, but it's objectively funny because, then I can move on. So if I can remove myself from the situation, and be left self-absorbed about it, sort of like I'm like this external person watching a movie, it's like, okay, now I can find humor in it and I can move on.
Yeah. So what I love, I'm going to nerd out a little bit on my own field, because what I love about what you just said is that one of the techniques that I work with and that I teach people to do is called intentional dissociation, which is like, dissociation is a term that we apply to, your body is doing it without your permission, right? You're checking out, you're not remembering things, you're having these trauma responses, but being able to separate yourself from yourself, right? To sit outside yourself and look at what's happening to you, and take your brain kind of out of your body and look at things, is the best way to try to make sense of an experience, because you don't get all caught up in the kind of the feelings and emotions that come up around it, and it gives you a chance to make a new meaning that is funny. So what I love about it is that I've found this so often in life, that we stumble upon what we call therapy techniques just in day-to-day life. You've stumbled upon on your own something that's, you're self-therapizing, right? Yeah. You don't need me. You're doing it for yourself.
Oops. Sorry.
Put me out of a job.
There are enough people who deal with anxiety and depression. I think we're good. Thank you, doctor.
But, hopefully people are learning some things from you today that they can, make use of in their day-to-day life, because I think it's a really valuable tool. I think, I'm wondering if there's anything else. I'm still kind of more curious about the school. Sorry, I'm thinking about a lot of different things we've been talking about. The school thing, it seems really important to work with kids on this, to demonstrate this, to model this for kids. Has that been any part of your drive, or just kind of expanding?
I hate kids. I couldn't care less about kids. No, I mean, I do have two young children, and we use a lot of comedy at home, just to sort of look at things objectively. Like you said, what's the terminology? Disassociate?
Dissociate, yeah.
Dissociate or disassociate? What is it?
People use it either way.
Okay. So
I always say dissociate. But
dissociate. Okay. So I do use a lot of comedy in my own life with my children, to just get over things, because sometimes people are like screaming and there's like chaos if you have young children, and I do find, like, stopping for a minute and just like making a joke about it. And what it's done is for my kids, and I can only talk about my own children. Right. What because I haven't done the program in detail yet. What I mentioned earlier about working with the schools, those the show or the initiative was actually for parents and for the staff. Okay. So it's more about for the parents and the staff rather than for the children. Sense. That's sort of the next level, because that's a whole other thing where you do like improv techniques and this kind of thing with children. But with my own kids, I do improv techniques, which is kind of to reduce anxiety. It's like the yes and like this is going on. So can we change it? No. Okay. Can we laugh about it? Can we add to it? How can we make the situation better? To the extreme when it comes to our shows, it's like I really try to turn the pain into punchlines, because that's what it's about, right? I mean, there is pain and pleasure are like, on the same continuum as you know much better than I do.
Definitely. So that brings me, I'm thinking about your kids and the life that you've had, and it quite often in these conversations, what comes up is the question of how do you separate, or do you, your kind of creative identity as a comedian from your personal identity as a human, in some way? Do you feel like there's a distinction there? Do you take on the role of comedian, or do you feel like you embody it, right? That it's a part of who you are?
Such a good question. So I think the first thing you need to do is to ensure that your children never read your comedy, or never read your comedy sets, especially if they're under a certain age, because my kids are like, "Mommy, what's a cougar?"
Mommy.
And that's not something you want to, your kids
Although it's an opportunity for learning.
It depends on their age. So,
right.
So I think that in like, in terms of separate, and do any of us online have a personal life anymore?
Oh,
the lines get more and more blurred.
Yeah.
And actually, the reason it took me like so long to sort of just break in and go into comedy is because I was like, oh no, I'm such a private person, But then I just found that actually it's such a great opportunity to talk about my experiences. I don't want to say as an oppressed Arab woman, no, just as a person, as a human, whether you have the societal challenges or the pressures on you. It's like, oh God, can I talk about my divorce? Can I talk about getting older? Can I talk about menopause? Can I talk about all these horrible things? Can I talk about all these private things? But by talking about it, it's actually a gift to somebody else, and I found a lot of younger ones. So I'm 51, I'm not embarrassed to say that. And in our culture, when you're 51, you're supposed to like sit at home and, never leave the house. No one can see you because you're just too old to be seen by the world. Yeah. And what's been really wonderful is, especially at my Funny Arabs shows, is I have these like young women in their 20s, and like I'm older than their mom, and they're like, oh my God, it's so great to see a woman who's that liberated and that like, vocal at your age. I'm like, what do you expect? Like, this is what you're supposed to be doing, just to lean in and just be yourself, whoever you are, at any age. So in the beginning, it was a little bit hard to answer your question about, privacy and maintain your personal life versus public. And now I'm just like, share what you're comfortable with, and hopefully people benefit from that.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think you're right. That's a whole other conversation we could have for another time about the expectations of women. I'm also 51. The expectations of women in this space of our lives, and how we're supposed to be, or what they expect of us. But no, I think the other thing about kind of the role of like your identity and as comedian and personal, I know that you've made a focus to work with BIPOC individuals and to promote Arab voices. Yeah. And maybe you could tell me a little bit more about what that means to you and why you chose to do that.
Sure. So I find, in DC is so diverse, and it's amazing. And, when I say diverse, I don't mean just like, black, white, brown, like diversity isn't just color, as it's age diversity, it's background diversity, it's just the, neurodivergent, right? It's whether you're queer or not, all those things. So it's really important to me to showcase like a range of diversity. My Traumedy show, or DC Traumedy Festival, is most interesting to me because, we also had like white comedians, like, guess what? White people have trauma too, because we all have trauma. Trauma is very much a shared experience, and everybody has trauma, right? Just as a human being, you have trauma. You experience grief and loss and pain and everything else. So I think it's really, it was really eye-opening to just, to show that like a lot of us, whether you're rich or poor, whatever, you can deal with sickness or anything that you just can't, that you can't help. So it's important to say that while I focus on, BIPOC comedians, I very much also include everyone who has that shared traumatic experience. And then you'd asked about like why Arab Americans. Is this what your question?
It was part of the whole question. Yeah. But just, I mean, it makes sense for your background, but you know what, I love doing a doctor, and because I do so much traveling and different, well, not anymore now, I'm like chained to my children, but I've lived in different countries all over the world, and I found like when you're an outsider, you can really see the gaps. So I just found like there's a gap. It's like, why is there no Arab American comedy festival? Like there's something for different communities, but there's nothing for Arab Americans in comedy per se. So that's what led me to create a Funny Arabs show. And because it's in English, I mean, it's for everybody, Yeah. No, I think I appreciate all of that. I think what you were saying about the universality of trauma is so important. And some people ask these days, in my field at least, like, are we overhyping trauma, right? Are we diluting it by using it too much? And I think what you were just describing is the answer to that, which is no, because everybody has it, right? We've all experienced trauma, and it is the way our brain learns to survive or not. And so the idea of approaching it from, we're all trauma survivors. Everybody here is, and we need to talk about it, because when we talk about it, we share it, and anything shared is less heavy to carry.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today and talking to me. This has been such a fun conversation, and I feel like I could honestly keep talking about it for a long time.
Thank you. Can I say something about my upcoming shows? Or
yes, please. Yes. Please do. No.
Okay.
Tell me more about it.
So I have some shows coming up with the Kennedy Center. We've already taken the Funny Arab show there twice. So we have more initiatives coming up with the Kennedy Center. And we also have a show at the Union Stage, Funny Arabs as well. So please come along and bring your friends. It's in English, so everybody's welcome. That's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm definitely going to be there. Thank you so much for being here today and for having this conversation. I really appreciated it. And thank you all for joining us. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Mayor Muriel Bowser and Director LaToya Foster for making this program possible. For more information on the Care for Creatives program, visit www.creativeaffairsdc.com.